And I wanted to, I really wanted to make sure that we have a recording of this one because I have a feeling that it's going to be one that we'll come back to and refer to quite a bit. And so just a little preface to the workshop. Earlier today, we were in tech hours at the Rec Innovation Lab, and I was talking with our presenter today, Vivek Chhabra, as well as one of our other amazing tech mentors, Jatin Nahar, and we were talking about the website creating for the Rec Innovation Lab, and we've needed, we've needed a website for a long time, and lucky enough that Jatin offered to help us get that set up, and I was trying to explain to him what we wanted, and then it was Vivek who said, Tanya, there's a workshop today on storyboarding. Put it in the storyboard. And that's exactly what I need to do. That's exactly what we use these, the skill for, is to help people to help us. It saves time, it saves money, and I'm just so excited that we're doing this workshop. So with that, I'm not going to chat anymore. I'm going to pass it over to our amazing presenter. He's you've seen him before, Vivek Chhabra. He's helped us with many different things at the Rec, and today he's going to be helping us with storyboarding. So take it away, Vivek. It's all you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody for coming to watch at 5 p.m. on Friday. I know it must be very, you guys must really think you're going party and you have to listen about storyboarding. So thanks for working with me on this one. Let me share my screen. And so before I go ahead about something, in fact, even for today's presentation, I had to think about a storyboard. What story I'm going to talk about? What do you guys want to listen? What my goals are, what my objectives are, and so on and so forth. So first of all, can you see my screen?
Yes, absolutely. We can see.
Okay. So I then thought about, storyboarding is it's an art, and we'll talk about that. It's not that much about a science as much initially, but then it started to become pretty much about how to do the storyboarding in a startup, in a tech startup, and so on and so forth. So in today's talk, I'm going to talk about what's the key importance of a storyboarding is, because we have observed, and I've observed quite a bit through NPI, which is new product introductions, and several other aspects of it, where such people just omit this step, and then they have to work several times to get back to on several of the factors with and aligning within the teams, within partners, within a lot of other areas. So this is one of the tools which I think needs to be the first tool which somebody else has to start from, okay, before you even start anything. So I'm going to talk about some disclaimer. This disclaimer is typically, I do that because I work with the financial world and investors and all sorts of stuff. So this is just all opinions and information in this presentation is actually based on personal research and should not be taken into any way investment advice. So there's no investment advice here, but if somebody wants to ask me about it, I just want to make sure that's what it does. Something about me. I built and ran a smartphone and IoT global business, and I also work with leading organizations like IBM Research, Marvell, and so on and so forth. And I have a pleasure to work with Miramar College to be a mentor and advisor to some of the companies there, as well as now I'm running this 21iQLabs, and I have a great team which is working with us to do consulting in different areas, robotics, 5G, and industrial IoT. And what I've done is that as a part of this process, I have found that storyboarding becomes a very, very critical way of giving your ideas and starting an idea and realizing them into not just products, not services. It actually has a broad implications. So what's a storyboard? Storyboard actually started from film industry. actually, if you look at it. So if you think about when you start a film, it used to be that you take a piece of paper and you basically start writing a story, a script, and you keep on writing a script until everybody agrees on, including an actor, including a producer, and even the distributor, and so on and so forth, that, you know what, I like this film, and this actually started also going into comics. And as you can see, this is like a comic. By the way, I took this picture from one of the stills of a movie, and I would like to know if somebody can tell me which movie is this. So this started with the filmmaking. It used to be in the early stages of the film, early age of still filmmaking, that you used to take cardboards and you build the characters, and you basically showcase your idea. I mean, how the idea will conceptualize in the whole world. And actually, if you think about it, new product creation is no different than that, because you're working from an art of conceptualizing your idea. You want to make sure before all the people get involved, they get involved in building the company with you, building a product with you. They need to be all on the same page, because if they're not on the same page, one guy, even if you write something down, one guy must be thinking something different, another guy must be thinking something different, and at the end you have a chaos, and you have to iterate a lot of time. So that's where the storyboarding helps a lot. So if, for example, today Tanya asked us about, you know what, I want this here, I want this here. It was coming bits and pieces. So what we went back to Tanya and said, you know what, why don't you just go back to drawing board, and you don't have to build the website yourself. Basically, you just need to take and put your idea, which picture goes where, what information goes on what area, and so on and so forth. And then you start sketching that thing for us so that we can conceptualize it in our heads and we can basically print it out for you. And in this case, we are building a website. Same applies to apps and several other parts of the equation. So the question is, where is it used? Actually, it is used in filmmaking, as you talked about, right? Avatar, for example, when it started out building Avatar, they basically first storyboarded it. I mean, how do you think that the characters which I talked about, they could visualize? They have to tell a designer, please build this character for me. You can't just say to him, I want this long nose and this and that. So you have to basically start building all those things in a conceptual way. So the designer will be able to go and take it and say, okay, now I know what your vision is. I can realize it. Oh, by the way, I want to change some few things here and there. And they go back to James Cameron and say, you know what, I don't like this. I think you should add something like this. And James, oh yeah, this looks good better. Let me just change certain parts of it. So that's sort of filmmaking. And by the way, just to give you a little bit of an idea, this the previous slide, which talked about, showed a caption of a storyboard. It came from film Argo. I know most of guys, you must have seen film Argo, in which the character goes and talks about this whole film is about taking people out of Iran and then basically through a storyboarding process and how they build the film around it, right? So the next important part is pitching an idea. I mean, you have a lot of things in your head. You have a lot of areas where you are thinking, oh, this idea should be like this, and this is what I think. But taking from what your thought process, putting into a paper or into any kind of convincing board or any convincing envelope or anything like that, and making sure that the idea comes across to somebody else who is going to implement it, who he or she is going to implement it, either or could be a partner company who will work with you. So it helps to make sure that everybody is in that area. And that's where it builds the consensus across. And it does it at an early stage of the process, because at that stage of the process, you are not too much worried about whether I'm going to spend money on building something which I need to tear it down. Maybe you're using a different tool. Maybe you have to use something which is not applicable for you, for what you have to do. Now, believe it or not, I've been in the boardrooms, and it is used in the boardrooms as well. You need to go and tell the board that this is what we're going to do in the next quarter or in next 2 years of planning process. That's also a story around it. So you need to sketch it out, your thought process, and build a consensus around it. So as we talked about, like, for example, we we're discussing about, Tanya, about the websites, we're talking about apps. When you talk about games, when the people build the games, they build a story around it. Same way with the products as well. So, and this has uses not only in these specific areas I talked about, but there are several areas we'll think about. So when you start thinking about convincing somebody about certain things, which has a lot of consensus building, you need to bring teams on board. You need to be able to iterate on the idea, because you may not have thought through each and everything. You want somebody to give you any answer, any suggestions. Storyboarding is the most effective way for you to be able to put that through across your idea. So don't think that this is only used for pure startups. Now, why to use? I already talked about that. But if you look at from a pure startup's perspective, it's about validating your startup idea. I can tell you 90%, if not 100%, or almost, a startup starts with an idea, with a thought process in their mind, how to conceptualize, productize, and so on and so forth. But they end up somewhere else. Okay. And it happens, I've seen all across the board. Even if a Boeing starts building a plane tomorrow, I mean, they have starting with certain things and they end up somewhere else. Even Tesla starts something, building a car, they start with somewhere else and they find some faults and they end up somewhere else. But the idea is that it's an iterative process. So you have to research it, you have to define it, you have to test your hypothesis, because you have a hypothesis, you're thinking this is how it's going to work out. It may not be right. You have to validate that hypothesis. When you work with customers, for example, right? And you want to do customer service, you go and validate that. You don't have to build the whole product. You just validate your idea around it. And then you launch it as a beta sometime, or alpha product, as which we call dog fooding. And for example, companies like Google, Facebooks of the world, before they introduce a product at a global level, they actually do a dog fooding exercise, which basically means that they give it to a set number of their users within the company, and they basically work through that process, and then they give them feedback so that everything is working from all different aspects of the product. Okay, so I think it's a very, very critical tool, how to use and why to use storyboarding. Okay, now I talked about earlier. So one of the important things is that, as I mentioned to you, when you put this on a storyboard, does it validate the concept? It basically allows you to make sure what you had in your mind is, you think that, oh, I will have 200 users on this, or 2000 users, or 10 million users. You may be thinking in the air. Maybe users wants to give you some false feedback. So you have to go back to your storyboard, what you call go back to your storyboard, and fix certain faults in your area. So either you can say yes, or you can say no across all sorts of what you're putting on the storyboard. And it's an iteration process. So this is very critical process, which every startup should go through to make sure that they are not burning money, which is burning money, burning time, and are very articulate in what will work in their product launches. Okay. Any questions from anybody, or are you, Tanya, are we going to go to these questions later on, I guess, right?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So if anybody does have any questions right away, they're welcome to put them into the chat. But yeah, we'll go through the questions at the end, unless there's something pressing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me just see, what did I do here? Okay. So that's a very critical part of it. And once you start doing this, it will give you a very good idea that at what phase your product, at least at a concept stage, is becoming to maturity from an idea and introduction perspective. Okay. And after that, it's all about implementation. So this has also been used in, let's say, designing clothes as well. This has been used in designing Coach bags. For example, somebody creates an idea and then they try it out in the market before somebody actually puts money to be able to build that whole product line. Okay. So the other part which is important is it brings the cross-functional teams on the same page. Remember I talked about filmmaking. In filmmaking, you have a producer, you have an actor, you have actress, you have multiple other actors as well, supporting actors. You may have some guy who is blowing up cars for some stunts and something, stuntmen, and you have distributors and so on and so forth. It's like a crew basically comes together to make a film. And similarly, in a startup, you have a crew. There is a CEO, there is a CMO, marketing person. There is a different functions, which is product management function. There's a developers. There are testers. There are all sorts of people. It's like think of like a filmmaking crew in there, right? Who has to see through the same lens. And startup becomes like a prism, which you see from a different angle, you'll see different colors. But you need to, the whole storyboard, what does it gives you a single prism so that it allows you to see, when you see from the same angle, gives you the same lens. Okay. Sorry, same color for through the same lens. And so it allows you to converge to a common goal. If the goal changes, because let's say you go into the iterative process of working with the customer feedback, and customer says, oh, you know what, I don't like this. Or you did a focal group, for example, and you come back, you can just change that on the storyboard, and then you converge to the common goal because now everybody's on the same page. So it makes everybody work together. And this becomes much more important, not just in startup, this is also important in large companies as well, where a lot of people have to come together to get a product out. Sometimes within internal company, but also external company with external partners as well. So let's talk about the next step. So what happens is that, what are the other compelling reasons for storyboarding? So for example, it also creates a foundation of a product. Foundation means that you have built a core foundation of the product, but you can iterate through the process and you can build derivative product lines around it if it is successful. So for example, Colgate as a toothpaste, right? They have, the toothpaste is same. There are only 2 or 3 things in that platform, in that product, ingredients, but everything else is all the same. It's different packaging. But when they go to different countries from marketing perspective, they will go to different countries and have a different storyboard for that. They have to understand what kind of packaging is required, what works over there, what does not work over there. Come back, run the focus groups, and that's what builds a foundation of the product for you. It also, as I mentioned earlier, eases in early customer survey, because when you go for an early customer survey, customer doesn't have a concept what you're talking about. They have to visualize it. And this is the way you can help them visualize it. You can say, as an example, in an app development, you should be able to say, customer, you can talk to the customer and say, customer, do you want to have this button on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, and so on and so forth. So you may assume that the customer may want only on the top of the right-hand side, top right-hand side of the screen, but it's better. Maybe you find that out that most of the customer are telling you, it's better for me to use it on the right-hand side or the lower right-hand side of the screen, as an example. So if you would have for example, done this work with your developers already to put the button on the top, you have to go back and change the software. Same thing on a website. So we talked about earlier on the website, where do you put the picture? You put the picture on the top, on the left, right? How does it look like? So it basically reduces a lot of early iterations of development, but it also focuses on the early experience for the user design process as well. So if you look at from a developer's perspective, right? Developers, what I found with some of the startups is that they just go straight to, let me just have a developer. Let the developer start working on it. I mean, the developer can start working on it, but you will face so much of time with the developer, because developer is not the creator of the concept. Developer is working with you to realize your concept into an implementation, which you want to showcase to the world, right? And so you need to step back and think about, I need to make sure there is a bigger picture is there, so that everybody, remember I talked about filmmaking, every actor, and when I talk about actor, in this case, developer could be an actor in here, support actor, for example, are all on the same page. So what it does is that in single product companies, it's one thing, but then you're doing the first product. And this is probably sometimes not true with the startups. Most startups fail after first product. But let's say you succeed in a first product, and then you have to start building a roadmap. So you need to tell the developer, you know what, I have this thing now. I want to have new iterations of this this product in a new phase, or I need to change a new UI on this, or and so on and so forth. So that something also helps to build an effective roadmap for you before you even introduce about thinking about a product going into the market. Okay, so so as I talked about earlier, so how it helps in a workflow in a company. So it helps to validate the market, as I talked about. So when you're going through the validation process on the left hand side, it basically, you find that certain things which you thought was great, but nobody is a taker for that. You need to drop, you need to iterate. And let's say some of the points you are able to take it through, and you took it to the next level, which is a problem, to validate the problem. Now you basically got the market validation, you want to now validate the problem, and you can validate up to the product. But when you're trying to validate the product or the far end, you may have to drop certain features in there. So it becomes an iterative process to help you in driving from a product idea to actually to a launch. And most importantly, it saves a lot of dollars, because what you're not doing is you're not bringing any inefficiencies into your process, where you are working with developers in the early stages, you're telling something different to a marketing person, you're telling something else to a partner, and so on and so forth. So you have to step back and bring that storyboard upfront. So whenever I actually try to do even a presentation to somebody, I think about what's the story I'm telling, and how each and every part of my, what we call slides nowadays.
Somebody else is fine. I just didn't know. What do you still want to be on the papers or no?
Sorry about that.
Do you still want to be on the company papers or no?
Kevin, can you turn off your microphone, please? Sorry, I think I got it off. I think I got it off.
So it's important that how do you save dollars upfront, and during the process of the company, how would you extend that runway? Okay, so let's say if you burn let's say you raise $100,000 for your startup, and you burn $25,000 without validating properly, and you ask the developers to start working on it, they just start getting onto the launch pad and building the product for you. And you find out after 3 months that a lot of things were wrong, and you have not done the storyboarding at all. And you have to go back to developers. So you are basically burning the money, which you could have extended for your runway of your company. So it has multiple phases where it can be integrated. So as I talked about, the best is when to use the storyboard, which is during the discovery phase of the product process, because that's where they save the most dollars, most effort, as well as you bring everybody onto the same page. And also when you're building a new product, right? While you're building a product, if you remember, I had a slide which talked about from a market, going to market and building the product. When you're building a new product, you will find that maybe certain things are not feasible anymore when you're building, especially a product which is a long-term product, a long development product cycle. And maybe things have changed, maybe new technology have come, and so on and so forth. You may have to go back to the storyboard once again to change. That's one. It could be that the market shift happened. So you may have to go back to the storyboard and say, okay, here we were, now we need to change our story to something else because we need to react to certain market conditions. It helps to build all the functions of the company, all the functions of overall your team, to be on the same page. And this is not only does internally, it also does externally as well. When you're working with your partners, your distributors, your any other, even the channels, and even your customers, because in the early development of the product, sometimes your customers have a lot of say in it. They give you a lot of input, and they cannot give you a lot of input if they do not know what you're building or what your thought process is. So having said that, what are some tools which you can use? I think we all are in a fancy world where we want to use best tools available on the on the internet, and there are a lot of applications available. But what I found best is you use a pencil and paper. You need to conceptualize with pencil and paper. Very simple, articulate boxes, which basically says, hey, this thing goes here, this thing goes there, because you can easily erase them, you know. But let's say you don't want to do pencil and paper too much because you want to be fancy about it. Or initially, you can use tools like Canva, InVision, and Storyboard, and there are a bunch of those things available on the app tool chain. Of course, these Canva and other tools, they allow you to collaborate, specifically in the COVID situation nowadays when people are working remotely, so to collaborate much more digitally. But if you want to start putting the first ideas on the paper, I think the best is pencil and paper. And I can tell you, even today, filmmaking is started with pencil and paper, and then they put onto the digital tool chains. With that, I would say the storyboarding is not only something which you think as a science. There's a science part of it because there's a tools and all that, but it's essentially an art, which I think every CEO and every product manager should learn to align, iterate, and eventually hopefully save money for what they're doing. So more you do, more you get as a part of it, better it becomes. So with that, that was my conclusion of my my presentation today. Hope this helps.
Thank you so much, Vivek. That's it's actually nice. I feel like it's a little demystified for me. I was afraid that some of it was maybe more complicated, and it's nice to hear that it's not. So thank you. So do we have any questions from the audience? If you'd like, you can unmute your microphone, or if you prefer, you can put it into the chat.
I have a question. This is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
I was just wondering, Vivek, would you ever be willing to look at our storyboards and complete them and critique them if we sent them to you?
Yeah, sure. Just share with me. That's fine.
And I do have a question as well, if that's okay. My question is, when we're doing a storyboard for a website, how much of the actual content do we need to include, and how much should it be more focused on the design, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a combination, but the design, see, at the end of the day, when people look at visually a website, mm-hmm. they look at visual parts first and then content part next. Okay, it's just a human nature. When you can quickly go through the colors and all those things very well. So you need to make sure that it's not very cluttered and so on and so forth, right? And nowadays you also have to worry about, okay, how will it show up on a mobile handset, mobile as well? Because I would say 50 to 60% of people even look at mobile, and they spend probably 5 or 6 seconds very quickly if they like it or not. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So to answer your question, what I found is that, and I can tell you, when I used to do storyboarding, my earlier stages of my career, I mean, I used to put 20 different things on my own slides, for example, But what you have to understand is that people want to look at only top 2 or 3 messages are the most important part. Right? Mm-hmm. And because specifically in today's world where you cannot push too much of information, it's called TMI syndrome, Right. So it's important to make it very simplified. Now, unless you're building something which is catering to different products to be selling on there, because you have to have a category and catalogs and all those things on that, right? Mm-hmm. But from putting out your message, it needs to be very simplified, very easy, pleasing, and so on and so forth as well. So that's why I say it's an art to some extent. Now, when it
Yeah.
comes to content,
Mhm.
content-wise is the same thing. I mean, when we looking at the storyboarding part for a website, you need to look at what the different panes of the website are, how the website is going to traverse from one page to another page, how many pages you want to get. Typically, people don't go into more than 3 levels deep.
Okay.
Typically, you know.
You mean in the storyboarding process or in general, just not to go through?
No, on a website, for example.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So you just don't want to go down too many rabbit holes of, yeah.
Correct,
So
because
up.
people will not have time
Right.
to go through all that stuff.
Right.
So, and again, even storyboarding is an iterative process. When you basically put together a storyboard, you're telling a developer and say, you know what, this is what I want, right? And the developer goes back and says, you know, certain things will look like this way because what you thought may not work it out that way, right? It may not be very pleasing for you. So at least you have a less iteration in there, right? Unless otherwise you go and tell, like we were discussing today, if you go and tell, I want this design here, I want that design here, when I can take that information and digest and process it differently than what you're thinking.
Exactly. But once it's down on paper, then you see exactly what it is that I want and how to do it. So
right.
I can save so much. Yeah.
Right. And the same thing, I keep on bringing the filmmaking, because filmmaking is actually perfected the storyboarding process, you know, and now it's becoming part of app development. Now, what is app developer, right? For example, or product development. It's all about you have different actors, different functions. You need to align everybody together.
Yeah.
So what you're thinking, what your concepts are, you should be able to put down on paper so people will be able to look at it and at least what the interpretation should be the same, what you want to let them realize, right? That's the most fundamental part, because sometimes what we think as a human being is that we just say something
and they understand
or we think something and it has a different interpretation.
Right, absolutely. There's a disconnect between the speaker and the listener, and
and I give. Sorry, go ahead. And I was going to give one example is that there are products which we have seen in the market in the past where the product name is outrageously difficult for people to even pronounce if they launch in a different parts of the world. Right. So you may just take that product. So that's why people repackage the same product into a different name, which is localized. And so they need to make sure that that name has no wrong connotations and so on and so forth. It can be very expensive for a company to be able to launch something and then later on find out that I need to go and change my supply chain or I need to change all sorts of stuff, which will become very costly to the company and reduces the margins in the company. Absolutely. So the storyboarding allows you to reduce those risks. Let's put it this way.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to wait until after you've launched to find something out that the name, you know, means something horrible in another language, or there's some terrible connotation. You know, Vivek, I often actually see people do that here in the United States, where they come up with a name for a company and it's difficult to pronounce, and what ends up happening is people won't say it then, and you're basically shooting yourself in the foot. You're making it so that you know, people aren't going to want to say the name of your company, and then they're going to choose a company that they can say without feeling embarrassed. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into choosing the right name too. But anyways.
Absolutely. And then in today's world, I mean, I can share with the team when we launched phones and things like that globally, I need to make sure everybody at a global level is on the same page. Because, for example, if you are launching some products globally or whatever you're doing, you are dealing with different time zones. You cannot just keep on putting in people's head everything all the time. So storyboarding helps people to come on the same page so that the outcomes are the same, right? Deterministic outcomes. And that's why it's important for startups to go through this process. And I won't even say startups. I think it's essential across the team. Wherever you're building wherever you're interacting more than one person for the common goals, it becomes a very handy tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw some other people poised to ask a question. We have a few more minutes together. Does any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I have one. This is going to be a little off the rails for you, but I'd like your thinking on this. computer's probably running. The question I have is I'm still, there's a little bit of a debate about, when you put up your web page, whether you're going to do a one-page scroll or multiple page. And I'm wondering if the storyboard can actually help in figuring that out, because people are so split on that concept, and I don't know which one I want to do yet. So.
Okay, so let me understand the question. So you're saying that when you're putting the things on the website, you think that it needs to be multiple pages or one page? That's what you think? What you're saying?
Yeah, there's people are split, and I think it's almost religious arguments in some respects about whether to put, because if you think phones and iPads and things like that, people don't like multiple pages, so they'll scroll. Whereas if you're on a laptop or a computer, you typically, you click on a page and you go from page to page. And a lot of, if you look, most websites now, they're kind of split. Some of them you just scroll down a lot, and some of them there's like 4 or 5. I mean, not a lot of pages, but a sufficient amount.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if I couldn't use this storyboard concept to if I'm putting a story together, maybe I can see how it fits together and then make a determination. I don't know. I'm just speculating here.
Let me try to answer that in a different way. So the way you need to think about is who's your audience, right? And what is the most places they use this information. Now, the one other thing you may want to keep in mind is that in today's browsers can detect actually, and you can actually put that on the website. Today's browser can detect, are you, when you are on a mobile phone, and you can send a command to the backend. And this is for, by the way, this is for the advanced development process. You can send a command to the backend, and basically will send you only relevant pages for that specific device. You can do that, okay? But there's a problem with that, is that creation of new websites around it for when the new devices come in, or the ecosystem like Android or on a mobile, for example, changes their strategy, you may have to change as well. So one thing I can tell you, you don't want people to go scrolling more than one page. So you typically want, what I mean is like, you can have scroll of 2 pages max. So first page, main page, and the second page, but you don't want to go to the third page, regardless of it.
No, that's good point. Yeah, because otherwise, when is this thing gonna end, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go more than 2 pages typically in the total of a website, like from a scrolling perspective.
Yeah, I may actually try this technique out on that. Thank you. It's very interesting.
I have just one more question. I know we don't have a whole lot of extra time, but I just have one question really quickly. And that's when the last time I built a really, I don't know, a real website for a business was before apps or mobile phones were as prevalent. And so I'm wondering, is there a lot that you need to do in terms of designing for the app? Do you have to, should you have almost like 2? I don't know exactly how it works. Like, how does it?
Not anymore. Not anymore. You can have, not anymore. And I think when you will put together your storyboard, I think, most of the there are tools, the APIs which are available right now, which allows you to basically automatically adjust to the screen sizes and so on and so forth. But again, you do still need to keep, from a design perspective, you don't want to clutter too much, because if you have too big of a content on same website, and you want to just start throwing that onto a smaller website on a mobile phone, it becomes an issue. Now, this was a lot more of an issue when our phones were only 4.5 inches, but most of the phones, I won't say, most of the phone in the US, for example, if that's what you're targeting, is minimum 5.5 inches screens now, So I think there's a lot of other things are happening from a browser's perspective. Having said that, you don't have to think too much about it that way. It will automatically does it.
Yeah, you used to have to, I mean, it was a whole separate process. I mean, the last time I did it, it was a
Correct.
big deal. So
Yeah.
Melissa had a question. I know we have about 3 more minutes. Melissa, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi, thank you. My question was about flow charts, or like a decision tree. How important is that to kind of have in conjunction with a storyboard? Because you know, there's a lot of different points and directions you can go from one page or from one link or one button. So that's,
Yeah.
to me, seems like it'd be very important to have.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think storyboard gives you one dimension out of it, right? It's just basically telling you that what is the first scene and what's the next scene and what you want to do next and so on and so forth, right? What's the story looks like. But within each of that, you need to still build the flow charts, you know, which basically allows you to do, how do you, within that, for example, first story of it, how the logic will actually work in there. So it depends upon what you're trying to do, of course, right? But the flow charting is also important, and specifically it becomes important because when you're doing, for example, multiple entities are in there from flow charting perspective. I'm talking about the logic side discussing right now. But if you're building a process, let's say, and you want to do a storyboarding of a workflow inside a company or inside your teams and so on and so forth, and a lot of what they fancy term right now is a transformation or digital transformation. And when you try to do some of those, you need to be able to articulate, okay, how the flow charting will work. What is the next decision is going to be? If something happens now, what's the next one? If some alert happens in the system, what happens next? But that's more, it's a combination tool which requires to do implementation parts more than just becoming a concept from an idea to a product part. Does it make sense?
Yes, that does. Would you start with one before the other, or which one would you start with?
I would start with storyboard.
Okay.
Yeah, always.
Okay, cool.
So
it's, and then from that, it's not necessarily chronological, the storyboard.
No, I think it's an iteration process, right? So I'm not sure what you're trying to do, but you start with storyboard and keep it high level at a macro level. You know, you don't need to go into the weeds of each and every parts of the storyboard. You keep it a very high level, 10,000 feet level, whatever the terminology you can use. And when you do all this, then it will start bringing to you that, okay, what do I need to do next? What is missing in here? And that automatically will drive your flow.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Right? Yeah, welcome.
So Vivek, would you like to take us out, leave the audience with a thought? Oh, before you do that though, I would ask that everybody, if you could please, there's a survey link that Enzo has put into the chat. It really does help us from the perspective of making the presentations just in workshops better and better all the time. I'm going to also put it in one more time. Please do fill that out when we leave here. And Vivek, will you take us out? Will you leave us with your final thought?
Sure. I think the final thought I will give you is that first time when you do a storyboard on something, leave it overnight for 2 days or 1 or 2 days, and then come back to it. You will find a lot of changes which you may want to change on that storyboard itself before you give it out to the rest of your team. That's one. And the second key part, I would say that use this as a tool across your teams and use it in phases. Don't use it, a storyboard is not something when your product is mature, then you start using storyboard. You have to use very early on in the process to figure it out that what you're building is actually working in the market or is going to work there. Is everybody aligned in there or not? So, but as I mentioned to you, it's an art. So more you do, you will become better.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming, and thank you all for joining us tonight. We will see you again very soon at the next workshop at the Rec Innovation Lab. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.